the listeners ask such good questions. If I were reading or watching the story, I feel like that's absolutely the types of questions that I would be asking and discussing. And
Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a D&D 5th edition actual play set in the Eberron campaign setting. I'm Philip.
And I'm Casey.
And this is another Khyber Shards Answers Questions, one of our Friday extras where we take some listener questions and check in with our players and characters. If you would like to submit questions for these, you can put them in comments on our videos, or you can come and join our Discord, which you can find a link to down below, and submit questions there. We have a channel for that. Yeah. So we've got Casey today, obviously, and we're going to be checking in with Shade. And we have quite a few fairly interesting listener questions. But first, I just wanted to check in. How's playing Shade going? Is she surprising you? You feel like you've started to get a handle on who she is, or what's it going on?
Yes, all of the above. I really enjoy playing with her. I like this character a lot. I like sort of the things that I don't know about her yet and finding those things out. I'm enjoying that. I enjoy thinking about her backstory and where she's going and how these friends/family members are now impacting her. I feel like I worry sometimes that I'm playing her inconsistently. I think that maybe I am less consistent with the voice. But I don't know how much of that is also trying to develop a three-dimensional character. Like, she isn't anxious 100% of the time. She's excited and angry and upset and worried. And so trying to what that looks like.
Yeah. People are contradictory, right? So, yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, I obviously, with the evidence of the last episode, and I definitely don't have any problem with sticking to a single voice for a character, just even across like a whole conversation. My gosh, that voice just trailed very rapidly into other parts of not really Europe. So yeah, I sympathize with that. It's so much harder, like playing at the table. I don't worry about it, but recording stuff, and especially now running the game, recording in Eberron Renewed as a player, and I've got just the one voice, and I lose it or something like that, and that's fine, but I know where I'm trying to get to. But having to remember what Carl sounded like a month apart, and having to decided what Gerald sounds like, just all of these different NPCs, and trying to stick with them it's hard. So.
But overall, you do such a good job. Like, you have such an impressive arsenal of voices. I was thinking through that because you do such a good job, and then obviously I play a lot with RA as well, and he does a good job with his character voices too. Mm-hmm. And I really just either talk quickly and in a higher voice, or talk lower and slower. Like, it's just the two things. Like, all of my characters have to fit in one of those.
Well, but they have Like they have different vocal mannerisms. Like I can tell, like with the different characters that you've played. I mean, you know, everyone has a type, and you have a type of person vaguely.
I do.
That's you know, there's a little sort of spectrum of people that you like to play, but they have different. You know, your character in the One Ring talks differently from the way Shade does, even though their voices aren't that different from each other, because they have different personalities and different hang-ups and strengths.
I'm trying.
I think it's
distinctly remember when we first started playing and not being able to, or maybe not being willing to try. And it is much more fun when you get into it.
Yeah. It definitely is. Definitely is. Well, let's have some listener questions. So our first question is from Eric over on our Discord. He says, Khyber Shards question for Shade/Casey. What are your thoughts on Ezri and Ari's always bickering? There's definitely much on display this episode.
Yes, very much so. I think it's complicated. I think the immediate and what she portrays is the fear of what that bickering could mean. If they disagree, are they going to get to a point in which they disagree so much that we won't be together anymore? And so it's often that fear of, is this the fight that will end things? I think because trying to remember that we're playing these characters that have been together for 18 months to 2 years now, like, surely bickering is not the norm. So
yeah.
Trying to figure out what arguments make her nervous versus what arguments are, it's another Tuesday.
Right.
And then I think it's also complicated in that neither one of them are often wrong. Like, they both bring up excellent points and excellent plans for how we get ourselves into or out of trouble. And so also her desire that, like, wait, but I value both of these ideas and therefore both of these people, and how do you reconcile that with them not agreeing? But it's,
yeah.
As a player, I think it's very amusing.
Oh yes, it's definitely entertaining. Like it's definitely entertaining. Well, in those situations, I'm essentially audience when when player arguments get going, or when player character arguments get going. I just get to be audience, so it's terribly amusing to me. Yeah. And then also from Eric, what concerns does Shade have with her mark growing and her lack of control over it? I'm interested in this because sometimes Shade seems very worried about her lack of control over her mark, and other times she seems kind of just like, you know, this is just what it is. And so I'm curious I'm also curious, what is Shade's feel on her on the chaoticness of her mark?
Well, I feel good that is what I'm communicating, because that is definitely how I perceive her feelings about the mark. That, and especially with it growing, complicating those feelings, that she doesn't want people to see it, but now it's bigger. So that's harder to hide. But consistently, like if you think about the times in which she has accidentally ignited or initiated the mark's magic, it's been in protection. And so I think there's a growing sense of appreciation for what it's done, that it is chaotic and it is unpredictable, but she also hasn't worked that hard, trained very much, because she hasn't felt like she's needed to. There was a big, giant, scary thing, and her mark did this amazing thing that, in her perception, protected her and her friends.
Yeah.
It also drew a lot of attention, and that's definitely the fear is, as it does these bigger, greater things, it is drawing more and more attention. And so what does that mean for being able to be here? What does that mean for her role in the friend group? Yeah, what does that mean for the future? But she is conflicted about its magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys got really lucky with the timing of how that played out, because I was thinking about it. What if that had been a round later? Because a round later, Pog would have been in the thing's jaws, and Esri would have been in one of its tentacles, and Lightning Bolt then fries a couple of your buddies. So I was thinking about that afterwards. It's like, wow, that would have and sometimes you get lucky, and maybe you keep getting lucky until you don't, and then there's a thing the character eventually has to come to terms with is what happens
as a player,
when it becomes inconvenient.
Right. As a player, it terrifies me. Like, it's just, oh my goodness, that like people are going to get hurt. And as the character trying to take stock of, well, these have been the experiences that she's had so far. Mm-hmm. And so what conclusions is she going to draw from that?
Yeah.
And so far she feels
Darren,
like it's helping.
Yeah. 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 I mean, to what degree is it like, I mean, because it's such a chaotic thing, because aberrant marks are so poorly understood, it's totally reasonable to imagine, well, apparently mine is just symbiotic with me and it helps out.
Yep.
Senses danger and saves me.
Go team. Right. Yes, very violently protects.
I mean, when you're dealing with a giant trash monster, that's not an unreasonable way to defend yourself.
Fair point.
Yeah. Darren asks for Casey, did you know that Shade Marks had the potential to cast Lightning Bolt, or was that a complete surprise to you?
That moment was amazing. That moment was so fantastic. I knew that, player-wise, I knew that the marks could increase in the power of spell that they cast. I didn't, going in, know when that was going to happen, even though you very well could have told us, and I am not great at remembering things.
I did not tell you.
Excellent. But no, I didn't know that moment was going to happen. Lightning Bolt is something that I had thought about moving forward. It fit so perfectly with Lightning lore, but it's definitely not something I had anticipated in that moment casting that the mark was capable of doing. It was awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was great. I was so happy with the way the moment played out. We had not decided at the beginning exactly what would cause the marks to grow. And as I mentioned on an earlier one of these, what I didn't want to do is have all the marks grow simultaneously, because it just feels weird narratively. And so it was really only a couple days before that recording that I had decided what I'm going to look for is stress moments that will cause the marks to trigger. And that was just such a perfect one, because you tried to do something and then realized, oh, I can't reach it. And so it just, that was, I mean, my decision-making process is very visible in the video.
But as a player, I I really appreciated that, because that could have absolutely been or that moment was, I didn't know my spells well enough, and tried to do a thing that I wasn't allowed to do. And instead of in any way chastising me for needing to know that, taking that opportunity to move the story forward, to move the character development forward, just as someone who is, still learning all of these rules, I just was really grateful for the way that you handled that. It was a cool moment, at a time that I was a little embarrassed that I tried to do something that I couldn't.
Well, I'm glad.
But
I'm glad
did fit with the character.
Yes. Yeah. It felt like a good moment. It was just a good improv moment. But I mean, also, to the point of knowing your stuff, and yes, it's good to know what your spells can do, but there's all these little details, and we didn't have like a map laid out or anything like that for you to reference for how exactly far am I from the thing. But my attitude has almost always been, and I know this is not news to you, you've played with me a lot, but my attitude has always been, it's my job to know all the stuff. It's y'all's job to know who your characters are, and we'll figure out how those things fit together. So I really like when somebody forgets what they're doing. We had a moment in episode back where RA got stuck on something he was trying to do and couldn't find it on his sheet. And I totally get that, you feel the sweat and it just makes you real embarrassed because the camera's on you and you're not doing anything. But that happens to everyone. We have all sat there at the table tearing through a book trying to find this thing, knowing, oh my gosh, I'm holding up the encounter and it's taking so long, and which spell was it? I had it all chosen. Like, all of us have done that, and so I don't know, I like the genuineness of that. It absolutely happens to everyone.
Part of actually playing. Yeah.
Yes, really is. Another question about the mark from Richard. How has the growth of the mark impacted Shade's immediate outlook on her continued life in Stormreach and her place in the group? Would she ever consider leaving the group if she thought she would protect them by doing so? And does this make her even more concerned for Donna Bella's welfare? He mistakenly calls her Belladonna, but I understand that's the normal form of that. For Donna Bella's welfare.
The listeners ask such good questions. If I were reading or watching the story, I feel like that's absolutely the types of questions that I would be asking and discussing. And the first question was about the growth of the mark, right? Mm-hmm. And her...
Yeah, how it impacts her
still
continued life in Stormreach and her place in the group, yeah.
It terrifies her, particularly because she is most comfortable in the shadows. This group she has found herself in is likes more attention than she does, but the physical growth of the mark, just taking up a larger space on her body and having to think through more intentionally how to cover it, worries her that it's going to be easily identifiable, and her previous experiences with people being able to identify it has absolutely led to being an outcast and, trying to get murdered or imprisoned. And so there's definitely that fear of she's learned how to hide the mark that she had, mm-hmm. but now it's a different one. And then also the growth of the power. It's Thunder Wave is a big spell, but it's also not a lightning beacon to the sky. Asking for more and more attention. And so just the physical increase of the mark and the power increase of the mark makes her worried about whether this will get noticed, and if and when it does, what that means about living in Stormreach and if that can continue, and what that means for her peers. If she's putting them in danger, if she's drawing attention towards them, will they ask her to leave? Everybody has talked about how, no, we'll stay together, but we've also been doing our day jobs, quietly living in a treehouse until the last few days, have led mostly quiet lives. And so, yeah, lots of fear of what all of this means in her relationship to her environment and her friends. And then
if she thought
the
she was
next
putting the
question
group in
tied into
danger?
that.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. No, what was, yes, I couldn't remember that second question.
Ties into that, yeah. Would, if she thought she was in danger of the group, would she consider leaving? Or is she just afraid they'll ask her to?
I struggle with this question. This is one of those ones that trying to separate myself from the character. Most of my characters tend to be more selfless. So of course, if she was putting them in danger, she would leave. Shade's, I'm not sure Shade is that selfless. I think Shade has found a group of people that have accepted her as much as she, or at least who she seems to be, accepts her, and I don't know that she'd be willing to give that up. I think her fear is breaking up of the group. I at this point, I don't think she would recognize the need to save them and have the willingness to leave them.
Yeah.
For their own safety.
And then lastly, does this make her even more concerned for Donnabella's welfare? Is she thinking, what if Donnabella's mark grows yet? Or is it still just, ah?
She is absolutely worried about Donnabella's welfare. If she somehow is contributing to people looking more for people with aberrant marks, then she has necessarily led to Donnabella's being in danger. And then she's also concerned because she has taken it upon herself. We've seen her try to check in on Donnabella several times, and if this is going to bring more attention to Shade, then that's going to make it more difficult for Shade to check on her well-being.
Yeah.
And so that, yeah, she absolutely is worried about Donnabella and what the attention from her mark could mean on being able to protect her.
Yeah. So I thought another interesting thing we could do, so since your mark has grown, we could talk a little bit about that. So you got to make a couple of choices with the mark since the last time we played. So you got to pick a new second level spell that the mark can cast, since it is now a lesser mark rather than the least mark. And you got to pick an evolution for your mark from a list that I generated for you. So you want to share what you chose?
Yes. If you are willing to remind me the names of them. Actually, I do think I have those written down right in front of me. For my second level spell, I chose Shatter. I thought the description of that fit really well with Lightning Lure and Thunder Wave that she already has. But I was also thinking how Shatter casts the loud thundering noises that you get to pick where it lands. And so I also liked the narratively that it might indicate more towards a control. Instead of Thunder Wave just pushing, being able to pinpoint now the sound would show that growth in the relationship between the mark and Shade as well.
Cool.
So I guess maybe not control, but relationally
Yeah.
growing. And then the other thing that I got to pick was Blade of Khyber, which I'm really excited about. And mechanically, I get to add additional damage by spending hit die. And flavor-wise, being able to show sort of lightning shooting up through her sword as she's stabbing to do that damage, I think just looks cool.
Yes, it definitely does. Yeah, well, that'd be cool. So I find this kind of, the way you keep talking about the mark, I like seeing the way the different characters are sort of relating to their marks, because with Shade, it feels very much the mark and I both do things. It seems like it's not my mark and I do things with my mark. It's like, this is the thing that lives on my shoulder, and sometimes it helps me too. And we're getting to know each other better, and we can do things a little bit more deliberately now because we're getting to know each other. It's like a symbiote or something.
Whether or not this makes sense in the world,
Sure.
The way that I view it as Shade is, we've talked a little about her need to have survived in the wild. And so she views it as sort of being touched by nature. Like, nature has implanted this mark on her, and nature uses that mark to protect her. And so she does very much view it as not necessarily a part of herself, but as something, nature, a thing that she loves and respects and values, is taking care of her. Just having some sort of relation while living alone in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Helps with survival.
So with that, I'm curious. A couple episodes back, we had Esri start practice sessions with Shade to try and help her learn to control the mark. Does she understand that need? Or is she humoring Esri in order to make Esri happy? Like, does she actually think this is something I've got to grasp and get control of?
I don't think so. I think she recognizes that it makes at least Ari and Esri nervous. And so to make them, if that's a thing that they think they need to be upset about, then she'll practice some. She likes being in the woods. She likes spending time with her friends. She likes practicing fighting. So it's not, it's not a big, what's the word? She's not really putting herself out to go through with this. But yeah, if it makes her friends feel better about her presence, she'll do it. But no, she's like, no, it's going to do what it's going to do. And that's usually very helpful.
Yeah, you can't grab nature, right? It just works. It's just its own
right.
thing. That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Which, sorry, I did think a little bit more about one of the previous questions about, would she be willing to leave for the good of her friends? And, very early on, we saw that she is willing to leave. But I think that still, even that first moment that was many, many moons ago, I think it's still, this is the best chance for survival, is being in a group of people who necessarily have to accept you because you have the same cause for outcast.
Yeah.
And so being able to leave that comfort and that belonging I don't think is something she can do yet, but I think she is willing to leave if it ensures her survival more.
Okay. Cool.
Ooh, I don't even like that she's that selfish.
It is against type for you. You do tend to play very, very caring, very selfless characters for the most part. So it is fun watching you fight that instinct to play a less nurturing person.
I like flawed characters. Like, as someone who enjoys stories, I want to make sure that I'm building a character that if I were watching or reading this, would find interesting.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I really like that about the group that we have, is that everyone created a very broken person who has the potential to grow into a mature, fully realized person, but none of them are starting off that way. It's the cardinal rule: don't make the most interesting thing that's happened to your character be in their backstory. And so you want the character to have room for growth, and it's just very cool to me as the GM to see. Sometimes you feel like as a GM, you get characters and you feel like this character really needs to kind of be pushed towards growth a little bit, and it's really cool to see that all of the players are thinking, how does this reflect the evolution of my character, rather than my needing to nudge in that way in any way at all. I guess it's a lot of fun.
I've really enjoyed all of the characters that the group has created, just their strengths and weaknesses and how they play that out, and how our own character strengths and weaknesses create difficulties for the rest of the group, and how they handle that. It's just, everybody's created really fascinating characters.
Yeah. Well, all right. That is all of our listener questions. Any final thoughts on where we're going? I'm really excited for them to see the next episode. It's a really good Shade episode.
I know,
and it's so hard not to. I keep having to say, nope, don't say anything about that. But there's a very good. It's a very good episode all around coming up, but it has some very interesting Shade-centered things, which are fun.
I am very excited about the viewers / listeners being able to see what happens next, sort of thing, and I'm very excited what that means for Shade too. So, other than being mean and teasing future episodes,
that's only 3 days away by the time they see this. So. So tune in Monday for whatever we're talking about, and see where we go next with Shade. So thank you, Casey, for joining for this, and thank you to our listeners for some really great, deep, thoughtful questions. We always like seeing that. Again, you can submit questions for these episodes by dropping your questions in comments, or by coming over to our Discord. We're also on all of the various social medias as at the Geek Pantheon on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, and Eric streams on Twitch under that name on various days in the week. So come check us out and come talk to us about the story so far. We're having a really good time. We hope you are too. Let us know what you think. In the meantime, this has been Khyber Shards. I'm Philip.
And I'm Casey.
And thanks for rolling with us.